So I'm Fiona McCauley. I'm the founder and CEO of the Wild Network. And I'd like to invite you to introduce yourselves as well. In the chat box, you can just write your name, where you're located, which organization you're from if you'd like. But we'd love to know who's with us. We'd love to know where you're joining us from. I'm going to tell you why Wild is linking women in the global development sector to coaching. And before I do that, I just want to share a story of my own with my social entrepreneur hat on. I founded a company in my mid-20s, and for a solid 5 years, we were a startup. The company was called Making Sense International, and our focus was on working in emerging economies, increasing economic opportunities for low-income people. And I had this idea that the sector that was serving youth, the youth economic development sector, helping young people get education that leads to jobs, financial inclusion, entrepreneurship, that all of the organizations who were serving young people could really be helped if we were better networked, sharing best practices with each other, having an annual conference, donor research agenda, these kinds of things. And for 2 years, I went around muttering about how somebody should organize this network of people who were supporting young people to increase their economic opportunities. And after 2 years of that, I entered a business pitch competition for women who wanted to scale their impact. And I was one of the winners. And one of the things that I received was a leadership coach. I was vaguely aware of this term, leadership coach. And I think I thought it was like something actually that was for losers. Like if you're failing, then you should get a coach. But actually what I learned is that leadership coaching is for winners. Leadership coaching is for people, is for strong leaders who want to be even stronger, for great leaders who want to be even greater. And through that leadership coaching, pretty quickly in a couple of weeks, I realized that the person who I was waiting for to come along to help raise the bar and the effectiveness of all of those of us working in youth economic development was actually me. And that leadership coaching was really transformational because it allowed me to scale my impact. It allowed me to have more difficult conversations with colleagues, clients, and vendors. And it made me both happier in the office and at home. So that brings us, I guess, to how we are. Like here we are 15 years later on this webinar. And it is has been a great privilege to be able to connect with Ethical Coach, who is the not-for-profit arm of the largest network of coaches globally. And with Ethical Coach, we have this opportunity to bring pro bono leadership coaching to women social entrepreneurs and women intrapreneurs who work in the global development sector, who are advancing women's leadership and who are also advancing or equity, diversity, and inclusion. So what we're going to talk about on this webinar is I'm going to talk briefly about why Wild is interested in supporting more women to gain the access to leadership coaches. And then we have the privilege of hearing from two of our colleagues, both an intrapreneur, Megan Gilgan, and a social entrepreneur, Monica Brand, and hear them talk candidly about what brought them to coaching, what they learned from it, the benefits they've had, and then they'd be happy to take your questions. I also have my colleague, Catherine Bean from Ethical Coach. Hey, Catherine, great to have you with us. And Catherine is going to be sharing some of the details about the pro bono coaching opportunity for women social entrepreneurs globally. So we hope we can have applicants from all around the globe, global north, global south. And she's also going to be talking about the opportunity for intrapreneurs and how we can support intrapreneurs who are already engaged in the Wild Network to be able to support them to advance the work they're doing around women's leadership or equity, diversity, and inclusion. So I'm just going to ask all our speakers to give us a wave. We've got Megan, Monica Brand. Hey, Monica, thanks for joining us. And also just to thank my colleague, Jen Gray, who is so instrumental behind the scenes. So I think it's probably pretty clear now, like why, as the leader of Wild, I'm so interested in linking other women to leadership coaching. It's been so instrumental in my life. Wild is a network, a global network of women social innovators and intrapreneurs, and we hold an annual forum called the Women in Global Development Leadership Forum. We'll be holding our third one. It was going to be on May 6th, but as you can imagine, it's been delayed, so we're now looking forward to October 26th. And this will be our third one. And what I've learned over the last 3 years of being in contact with hundreds of women who work in the global development sector is that we are change makers. We are leaders of ourselves. We are leaders of others. We are leaders of programs. We are already making a significant impact, a positive impact in all of the different sectors that we're working, both in our home countries as well as overseas. I've also learned that we are all really interested in having a greater impact in our work. We are interested in thriving in the workplace. We are interested in moving up the ranks, having more influence, having more say. I think we have a vision for the workplaces we want, in addition to the programs that we're implementing. And in order to be able to implement those visions, we need to have the strongest leadership skills possible. I think we need leadership coaches, just like athletes have coaches, to help them get even better. And so I'm excited to see, what this is going to net, being able to link more women with coaches. So my goals for this webinar is that you will all want to go to the URL, which I know Jen is putting into the chat box, to think about applying. Another goal of mine is that you will want to share this opportunity with others. And also, even if this pro bono opportunity isn't for you, I hope that you're going to leave with some questions answered about what is leadership coaching and how it might support you to reach your leadership goals now or in the future. Okay, awesome. All your questions are welcome, and I'll take a look at the chat box in a moment to see what of those I might answer. But at this moment, I would love to turn over to Monica Brand. And Monica, I'm going to invite you to introduce yourself, and then just kind of, whatever you'd like to share with our group about leadership coaching. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Fiona, and thanks to all of you for sharing your lunch hour on the Eastern Coast with me. If you hear rumblings in the background, it's my family looking for lunch. As Fiona said, my name is Monica Brand Engel. I'm co-founder of Quona Capital, which is a venture firm focused on fintech for inclusion in emerging markets. And I start with that not only to explain who I am and the perspective that I bring to the conversation, but also to say, just by the definition, that I work in a world where there are just not a lot of women, not a lot of Latinas, which I also am. And by definition, it's a very diverse, when you're working in emerging markets, you're talking about cross-cultural questions as well. So the reason, and Fiona asked me to share a little bit about my journey with coaching. I've used a coach probably, I would say, for almost 20 years. So for the vast majority of my professional life, and I should say probably in that time have worked with maybe 5 or 6 different coaches, both personal as well as my partners and I, for example, have a team coach. So happy to talk about different kinds of coaching I work with. And maybe I'll start with the why. So the why I've worked with coaches is for a number of reasons. As someone who herself is maybe a mutt, if we're being self-deprecating, meaning I'm half Peruvian, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multicultural family is how I was raised. I think I appreciate that the lens you bring to a conversation and to a relationship dynamic really influences how that dynamic plays out. And so the first reason was just to build awareness. I don't know if you've ever been in a meeting where you think you've agreed to something or said something, you walk away with very different understandings of what was agreed, what each person should act on. So one was just an awareness of how could we experience the same reality so differently, number one. Number two was to build new muscles. So maybe the metaphor I use, I have a history of heart disease, and so I run as a way to build heart health. And I had these back pains after a couple of years after my twins were born, and trying to figure out what it was. Finally, a physical therapist said, "Monica, your front quads are so developed, you have to start literally running backwards because you have this imbalance. It's the imbalance between the muscles that is causing this back pain." So now every run I do, I run for 5 minutes backwards, pain's gone. It's just so interesting, just literally physically turning around would change a physical experience that dramatically. And I think coaching is the same way. You're building new muscles. So even things like there's something called nonviolent communication, of how you speak in a way that might take you more seriously. I've noticed my kids tell me that when I'm on conference calls, my voice is lower, which is really interesting to me, why that happens. So, or that I smile less, another very interesting thing to figure out. But all of things, I think, really make an impact on how the other person is experiencing you. And there's actually more, those are kind of maybe external or outwardly ones. They're much more internal ones about when do I speak versus when do I stay silent. Do I ask a question or do I make a statement? And I think all of those are tools that you use in different contexts. So to me, coaching has also given me a whole, not only opened up new lenses on how to see different situations, it's equipped me with different tools on how I might choose to react or show up in different situations, which I think is also just makes me much more versatile as a leader. And I think more empathetic in understanding why did someone else show up in a certain way. Maybe the last thing I'll say, and again, I hope this, I know there's a lot of names on a lot of boxes with mute buttons, which I hope get unmuted, because I think it's always interesting to hear the interaction. I'll say two more things, one about how I chose a coach and also the personal impact. You know, I've done lots of 360s and feedback sessions with the people I work with, the people I'm accountable to, the people who report to me, and themes come up over and over again. And I think there's a difference between knowing kind of where your blind spots are, and I'll call them blind spots because I don't think there's good and bad. I think, again, we all have a bunch of things that, you know, we bring to the table, and those blind spots, or maybe bad habits, or whatever you want to characterize, sometimes show up at home too. So I've actually thinks it's made me like a better mom and a better spouse, quite frankly. So I do think I'm a big believer in coaching. In fact, one of my journeys, and I admitted this to Fiona, working in a context in emerging markets, which are much more hierarchical, which, you know, having the answer, the leader having the answer is what is normed and expected. So the idea of like embracing the question or embracing I don't know, which is much more, my formative years were in Silicon Valley. So this idea of, you know, everyone's the same, meritocracy, open cubicles, no one has an office. I mean, that is not how, or even what my team wants. They want me to be in an office, in a corner office, you know, with a title and, you know, leading the meeting. So just how I bring I think, you know, coaching is a great equalizer, because any good coach knows that the answer is within you. Any good coach is not going to tell you, oh, this is what you should do. They're going to keep asking you questions and help you on a journey of figuring out the wisdom is within you. You just have to figure out how to channel it, right? So that is, you know, at least my experience of coaching. And so bringing that approach and perspective and style to an emerging market where, again, it's the cultural expectations and the comfort with even voicing that you're upset or that you disagree. Those are all things that we are learning how to do. So I'm very interested in this group in particular because I understand that you're global in perspective. And so love to hear how everything I'm saying lands for you and your reality of what you're facing, because I'm sure I could take away insights for myself in my own situation. Oh, last thing, I'm choosing a coach. I don't think there's any magic. I don't think there's any, I don't believe there's one right coach there for people. I think coaches, like every other professional, come with a variety of skill sets, perspectives, ways of speaking and engaging that might work with you or not. I don't think, again, I think it's a fit question. And I really do encourage people to, you know, interview and you know, and sort of give feedback if you don't understand what they're saying or don't understand how what they're saying applies to your situation. I do think it sometimes takes a few steps for it to click. So I'll just say, you know, again, I've worked with men and women. I could talk about that. I've worked with non-Americans and Americans. So, you know, happy to kind of share my experience, but I will say I'm a very big believer in coaching, and it's why I continue to do it.
Monica, thanks so much for sharing that information. I'm sure that our audience of about 60 people may have questions for you. And folks, we're going to invite you just to put your questions in the question box. I wish we were unmuting everyone to have more of a conversation. I think because of the Zoom bombing that's been taking place, this just felt like a safer way to go. So, you know, hope you understand that. So, but your questions are all welcome in the question box. And now I'd love to turn over to Megan Gilligan, who's the Deputy Director for the Partnerships Division at UNICEF. Megan is one of the great entrepreneurs that I know. She has a long history of making change internally. And Megan, I'm really grateful that you could join us today. Would love to hear what your experience has been with coaching.
Great, thanks. Wonderful to see everybody, and so glad that this initiative has been launched. And I think that this is a real time for leadership and a real time for women's leadership. So want to thank Ethical Coach and Wild for making this possible. I think it's a great opportunity. Maybe just to tell you a little bit about me, I have worked for UNICEF for about 13 years, but worked in international cooperation for about 20. I started really being very interested in the post-conflict dynamics, so I lived and worked in Afghanistan and Kosovo, and development programming in Bangladesh, and most recently for 8 years I was based in Kenya and was the regional emergency advisor for Eastern and Southern Africa for UNICEF. So was in and out of Somalia, South Sudan, Southern Africa, and other places. And I've been in New York for the last 3 years. So really my kind of leadership experience has gone from leading smaller teams to bigger teams, and now really being part of the kind of global management team, which is how do we lead the organization. My first experience of coaching was in 2012, and I participated in a leadership development program with INSEAD. And as part of that program, I was assigned to coach. And so I remember doing my 360 and having my first engagement with the coach, and I was very prepared for the coach to tell me about how I needed to sharpen my strategy, how I needed to, refine my technical skills, and was ready to take all of that on board. And, the coach read through the different feedback, the 360, some of the things that I had put in place, and said, you've got a really great skill set. You're a good communicator. People think that you have a lot of good strategic insight. And I really don't think you're going to get the chance to optimize all of that because you score way down at the bottom in terms of work-life balance and self-management. So you are going to burn yourself out before you have a chance to really kind of maximize all of the things you're working on. And I kind of was like, what are you talking about? You're supposed to really be helping me sharpen my technical skills. And he was like, no, that's really not what I'm here for. So for me, what was hugely insightful from that was making that shift from I am valued because of my technical expertise that I bring to I am valued in terms of how I lead a team and bring the best out of others, and really to make the mind shift between your technical expertise and your behavioral approach. And coaching for me is really about behavior. And very much as Monica said, for me, it's an inside out process. So for me, one of the important things that has come out of that is to be thinking and be much more purposeful about how do I show up to support my team? How do I show up to support my organization? And how do I kind of bring my perspective, and much of that might be technical or bringing in my experience, but how do I really bring that to bear in a forceful way, in a supportive way, in the way that is appropriate in the organization? So I think a lot of that comes from understanding yourself better, understanding what your knee-jerk reactions are. I feel like a lot of my career I was very reactive, and a lot of those reactions were good, but sometimes they didn't serve me well, and I think I got a lot of good feedback through the process of that. I think the other thing that for me is so important about coaching is to understand what you uniquely bring to your team and to your organization. And I think that's something perhaps that we don't think enough about, is about what do I uniquely bring and how do I actually build on those strengths. And one of the really good analogies that I always like about coaching is the differentiation between being a doctor and being a coach, like an athletic coach. So a doctor is there to kind of fix something that's not working, right? You're not feeling well, you're sick, you go to the doctor, you hope that the doctor fixes what's not working or helps you fix it. The coach is really looking at, what do you bring to this equation that's really uniquely you? And how do we build on those? The analogy of the athletics coach. How do we make you the best you can be? So just this morning when I was thinking the kind of maybe the 5 things that I've learned through a coaching experience, and like Monica, I have had probably 3 or 4 different coaches over periods of times, engaged with them very systematically when I was looking at career transitions. And I would agree with her is that it's really about fit, and different people can in some ways bring a different perspective depending on where you are in your life and your career. So the 5 things that I've learned, I think the first thing that I learned was the whole issue of emotional engagement or intelligence or sensitivity, however you talk about that, that can be an asset. And partially, I think, because I spent my early career in the humanitarian field and interacting in the peacekeeping field, it's quite a macho culture. And so I had kind of modeled myself as someone that tried to shut down my emotion and wasn't necessarily open to the emotions of others. And coaching really helped me switch that in my mind, because I do have a good sense of people. That's something that I do quite well. And I actually need to be able to leverage that while not getting overly reacted or activated by that. So that was number 1. The second one was to focus on how I manage myself to be able to effectively manage others. And I think this is also one that many women have challenges with. And I have been through cycles of burnout, which is really clear that I'm not managing myself appropriately. And that means that I don't show up for my team in the best way. And I think sometimes as women, we tend to be very other focused. If you can't take care of yourself for yourself, maybe the fact that you can take care of yourself for your team gives you a little bit more motivation for that. So to focus on myself so I know how to show up for others. The third thing, and I think again a really important one for women, is to let go of perfectionism. I didn't even know that perfectionism was something that was not desirable. I had really held that up as both in my personal life and in my professional. I think through coaching, you don't have to be perfect, particularly if that's a kind of outside standard that's impossible to meet. You just have to be you, and you will be human, and you will succeed at things, and there's things that you're less good at, and all of that is absolutely fine. The fourth thing, to be more open to feedback and to see feedback not as criticism, but to see feedback as information. And some of the best feedback I've ever got has been from my colleagues, facilitated through a 360, and then having the coach really try to unpack that with me. And I still remember some of those very early comments from the first time I did that process. And the fifth thing, it made me learn how to ask for help. And again, not something that I was necessarily good at doing, and something I'm still very conscious of needing to do more. But I think that whole process of, I don't have to have all of the answers, but I need to know who on my team might be better placed to help me figure this out. How can I put 2 or 3 people together that are really going to unlock this problem and help us move forward in a new way? And I found that really, really exciting. So very happy to stand by and answer any questions. And again, really happy that this opportunity is being provided to women in this network.
Great. Wonderful, Megan. Thank you so much for, so candidly sharing what your experiences with coaching. And Monica, I really want to extend the same gratitude to you. And so it's sort of exciting to hear an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur speak back to back like that. Catherine, we're going to swing over to you in just a moment. And to kind of get into some of the specifics of the pro bono coaching opportunity. And one of the questions that we have is what level of professional experience, is the opportunity going to be aimed at? So I just want to give you a heads up on Catherine. Would love to hear you speak to that. As a precursor, Megan and Monica, there is this question about well, at what stage of your career, is coaching appropriate for? Maybe we could just ask Monica, if you want to just go ahead first, you mentioned you've had a coach for 20, coaches over the last 20 years. So maybe you can just speak a little bit about how coaching helped your 25-year-old self, your 35-year-old self, and I'll let you take the age span from there.
Yeah, I started when I was 12. So no. And I think Megan made a reference to using coaches during career transitions, and I think that's a great segue into a similar experience where I use coaches differently for different purposes. So earlier in my career, I would say was on decisions professionally. For example, I did start early. I turned down a job at McKinsey to work at Axion, and this idea of turning down a big name to work at a nonprofit, and even professionally, because of the resources different, even the orientation, like this notion. I think it's a beautiful thing Megan said about focusing on oneself. I think many purpose-driven organizations have an endemic culture of focusing on the mission, on other, and really treating employees terribly. Like that's almost that is too pedestrian to worry about. And again, guilty of it myself at times. I think getting caught up in that, sort of mission focus or accomplishment focus. So I think coaches have helped me both on making choices, meaning how can I choose both careers, meaning if I did choose a for-profit, how can I find meaning in my work and in my extracurriculars? And if I chose a nonprofit, how could I make sure that I didn't get caught up in the mission and lost the me in that? So I would say early on, it was a more fundamental, just even frameworks to help me think about the and versus the or. So I think, again, when you're younger, it's a little bit more black and white. And as you get older, you realize the shades of gray. As I'm older, interestingly, and this is hard, and I'm still on the journey, letting go that I'm not going to change my partner, whether my husband or my business partner, like just knowing there is a more than 50% chance he will be exactly the same, and just how do I do, and so I can either just keep stomping about it, or I can make different choices. And sometimes you say that I am not willing to do this. So sometimes it is the stop and you draw a line. Other times, like, okay, I can live with this, I'll call it out, but I'm gonna move on and not let it eat me up. So I bring it home. So I would say it's a higher order level. But oftentimes, it's interesting, I've actually gone back to coaches I've used in the past because they do know the inside out process. I also really agree with. It is knowing me, it is about me, both the challenge, the answers are within you, but also are some of the challenges, right? We all contribute to the bad outcomes we live, and just knowing and accepting doesn't mean you're bad or wrong, but that you can change the outcome, even when confronted with a very, very difficult person or difficult situation.
Okay. Fantastic. Thanks, Monica. So Megan, would love to kind of hear if you want to sort of talk about coaching in the different times in your career. I guess it could be age related, or whether you were mid-career or like senior. And just to answer that question, really appreciate the question that was posed by Marielle. So the opportunity, and Catherine will speak more in a moment about it, but is for people who are newer to the workforce, mid-career professionals, and senior career professionals. And there's a great roster of coaches that Ethical Coach has recruited to really be suitable for those different levels. Megan, over to you.
Great. I think the first coaching experience I had was very much as I was in the middle management tier, but perhaps at the beginning level of that. And I think that's a wonderful time to engage with a coach, because it really is this transition from you being an individual contributor, valued for your technical expertise and what you can contribute, to being a leader of others and really being responsible for ensuring that the team contributes as a whole, and that you can maximize the talents of all of the individual contributors that you have. So I found that really useful. And I think it really kind of changed my perspective as I moved through that middle management tier. So, and I think it's good to kind of have some benchmarks in that, when you really are taking on more managerial responsibility, and then perhaps kind of checking in when you've been doing it for a while, to just get a sense of, I think, as Monica said, like, what are the muscles that I'm not exercising? Am I overly dependent on a certain style? Are there people or teams that I find really difficult to engage with, and why is that? So I think really useful in the mid-career perspective. And then I think, as I said, I've used them in job transitions, and UNICEF has of late actually provided coaches to senior leaders as they're transitioning into new positions, which I think is a fantastic thing. And what I have found very useful, and maybe also goes back to what Monica had said in terms of team coaching, is just to really help us when we're transitioning into taking on a new role. What are the expectations of us in that role from the team? How has that role been defined previously? How do we want to define it? Those, I think, are all really useful discussions to be able to have with a coach. And just to really have, in some ways, I find the coach so useful because the coach is separated from your professional setting in terms of not being part of your organization. And so can really provide you with a real safe space to say, you know, this is something that it's not working for me, and I'm really struggling with how to address that without kind of fear that you're talking to your boss or you're talking to your peer or any of those issues. So just that real sense of trust and safety, I think, is really important at all of these phases of career.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Megan. So one of the questions we have from Flacia is, how does one create a balance during the coaching process so that you're not codependent on the coach? So maybe Monica and Megan, we'll start with you, Megan, if I can just ask for just like very brief answers to that. So how do you create a balance during the coaching process so that you're not codependent on the coach?
I would say that coaches are pretty good at that. I think that's an important part of coach training.
Yeah.
In my experience, I think coaches have been very good in terms of what are the boundaries of what they can do and what they can't do, and have been very frank with that. I haven't really experienced that kind of codependency issue. And I've also had a coach that said, you know what, I'm stepping back now because while I really like interacting with you and I appreciate the sessions that we have, I don't think this is a time when you kind of really need that really constant interaction. So I'm going to step back. I'm here if you need me. Maybe we re-engage in a couple of months. So I think I would trust also that the coach is quite conscious of what their role is and what their barriers are. And that's a really important part of their kind of formation.
Fantastic. Thanks, Megan. Monica.
Yeah, no, I would say very similar experience. And I do I clearly enjoy it. And so I think, I don't know if I'd call it codependency, but I do think, coach is saying, this is the time we have, this is the frequency we need to meet. And in fact, I would say, because I think another question that was asked was some criteria. I would say if you are getting, any opposite signals, either like kind of ragging on your partner, the person you're complaining, or whoever your nemesis is, and there's not always a nemesis, but sometimes there is, that provokes the coaching situation. That's a kind of a sign that, because that isn't something that I think is helpful. I think the notion of keeping that professionalism, which is the distance, the kind of pointing out where you're contributing to the problem versus just very constructive ways of getting out of it. But I will say I have it is an emotional. You are making yourself vulnerable, right? So it's very hard. It doesn't feel like a doctor to me. It definitely the relationship feels closer than other service providers I've hired. So I can see how that slippery slope could come up.
Okay, awesome, Monica. And we'll hear more from Catherine on that question too. But I think what's interesting, Megan and Monica, listening to what you're saying, is that I think it reinforces some of the statistics of what we know about coaching. Coming out from the International Coaching Foundation is that 70% of people who've received coaching report improved work performance, relationships, and more effective communication skills. So I think those are some of the themes, that we're hearing from what you're talking about. And in addition, 80% of people who receive coaching report increased self-confidence. So we appreciate hearing kind of your stories and your experiences, because I think that sort of reinforces, the other data that we have. So very briefly then, as we've now transitioned to speaking more specifically about the pro bono coaching opportunity that Wild and Ethical Coach are bringing you together, is that Ethical Coach is looking at, has sourced these tremendous coaches to provide a 6-month engagement. And we have, Catherine will speak more of the details about what happens in those 6 months. But to let you know that we have 2 categories. So we have an intrapreneur category, and that again is for women who are advancing women's leadership, equity, or diversity inclusion in the global development sector. And for that intrapreneur category, it's open to people who are registered participants of the 2020 Women in Global Development Leadership Forum. I know a number of you have joined us or have participated in past forums, and you're registered for the current forum. So this is open to you, and if the forum speaks to anyone else out there that you're interested in registering and then being qualified to apply for that entrepreneur pool, please do. We have a second pool, which is for social entrepreneurs who are advancing women's leadership or equity, diversity and inclusion across the US, Canada, or anywhere else around the world. And in particular, we encourage applications from women both in the Global South and in the Global North. And my colleague Jen has put the URL in for where you can, how you can apply for those coaching opportunities. And I think one of the really generous things about Ethical Coach is that having sourced so many experienced leadership coaches who want to be part of this initiative, we feel like we have, it's like just a really good opportunity. Like if you apply, and you sort of are committing to the commitment that is required, there's just like a really good chance that you're going to end up being one of the successful applicants. So I love that we have such a high volume of coaches that are available. Thanks again to our partner. And so if you're interested, I really encourage you to apply, because chances are you're going to end up in this great leadership coaching opportunity. All right, so one of the speakers we've all been waiting for now is Catherine Bean. So Catherine, thanks for all your great collaboration over the recent months. Would love to invite you now to introduce yourself and to talk specifically about this opportunity. And I'm sure you've also heard things that Megan and Monica have shared that you would like to build on. And so just invite you to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Catherine Bean, and I'm located in Ottawa, Canada, with Ethical Coach for the last few years. And really what we look at doing is bringing pro bono coaching to leaders that are making an impact in the world. And I think that's when we saw this partnership with Wild. It was just so perfect, because it can see not just everybody on the call today, but just within the network that are doing such wonderful things. And one of the things that we've looked at as we've brought coaches onto different projects that we do is really bringing together a world-class team of experienced and professional coaches. And, Megan, when you say like you've never had an experience with that codependency and someone not being professional, that's exactly what we want, right? So we look at whether it be number of coaching hours, various accredited bodies that exist globally. So those can be some things to look at if you're looking for a coach in what you have there. And then some of it comes down to a little bit of that sweet spot. And I know Monica shared a bit, is sometimes you need to look at a couple different people to find that mix of, who's the right person for you in this period in your life for what you're trying to do. And we've really tried to look at coaches coming into this program who have a variety of backgrounds and experiences. So whether they're team coaches, so we have individuals with teams who might be working with individuals who are really trying to look at how do they interact with their stakeholders, their clients, and their teams. Individuals who come from different sectors. So maybe you've done a lot of work in the strategy world, finance world. So to be able to draw some of those experience in who they're working. Those that have worked in different parts of the world, different not-for-profits that exist. So I'm really excited from the different coaches that we have, because as I've been looking at the applications coming in, I think that's one thing that's really stood out is everybody's not the same and not looking for the same type of growth in the 6-month period. So I feel super excited about what's going to happen for everyone that's part of this program over the next 6-7 months. So what we've set up this program, and one of the things, and I'm sure anybody who's had a coach before, is up front you're going to do a little bit of that contracting with your coach, right? So you're talking about how long are we going to be meeting for? What am I looking to get out of this as a person who's receiving coaching? So we've set this program up with certainly that introduction session to be able to explore that. And then looking at roughly 2 coaching sessions a month, probably around an hour or so, to continue to build on your learning. And one of the things we'll see is sometimes if people have too much time spread out, if you're not in the habit of that growth and development, you don't want to start your next session. Okay, so what did we talk about last time? What was I supposed to be doing? Because I actually didn't do it, right? So to get that momentum with you and the growth and what you're experiencing. And then certainly want to make sure at the end of the 6-month engagement that there's a wrap up for 2 things. So one, focus on the accomplishments you've made, and then tying into that part of, not wanting to be codependent, but what are those go forward strategies that you have to continue? So this growth and development that you have isn't just for the 6-month period that you have a coach, but continues to hopefully be a lifelong journey that you have for that. Now, for us, one of the things, and I thought I would share because we've touched a little bit about choosing your own coach, is around matching. So what we're envisioning is that we'll share 2 to 3 coaches that we think could be a match for you to look through their profile, which we'll share in a quick 1-page snapshot, for you to express your preferences so that we're sort of matching someone who you think you might jive with. But likewise, we're also doing this with the coaches, right? So coaches are aware of a bit of their sweet spot, what they might be passionate in giving their time to. So also sharing a few clients with them, and then some magic behind the scenes of where we match and get people going. So that's sort of how we're envisioning the program going on over the following 6-7 months. So I'll pause there and see. I think we've sort of answered some questions, but I see some have popped up in the chat. So what can I expand on further? So I see, Fiona, you have your hand up, so you might have that question. And Fiona, if you just want to tap your mute button.
Thanks so much. Because of the security controls we have, I don't have ability over to unmute myself. But anyway, we're there now. So Catherine, thanks for sharing all that. I know that Monica is with us just for another couple of minutes. So if it's okay, I just want to see if anyone has any questions from Monica before she has to step off, before she needs to step off. Okay, I don't think any specific questions for you, Monica. Monica, do you have any just parting words for us? Is there anything that you maybe heard Catherine say that you want to reinforce or build on?
No, again, I think it's a fantastic program. I might reach out to Catherine after myself around our own needs. But no, I think it's great. It's a really inspiring initiative and gave me lots of good insight to bring them back to my own organization. So thank you for sharing the time with me. I apologize. I did have another commitment to drop with. I have to drop off.
Yeah. Thanks so much for being with us, Monica.
You're very welcome. Have a good, stay safe and healthy, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks, Monica.
Bye.
So Catherine, so we have one of these questions. One of our first questions is, do coaches specifically incorporate feminist leadership principles, or do any specialize in those approaches?
So some will have a specialization in where they're looked at. So one of the things that we look for in the coaches we're selecting for this program is that they have a wide toolkit. So you may find coaches that you look that have a specific methodology, and they're always going to apply that methodology with their clients. One of the things that we think important here is not everybody is from the same organization, the same part in their career, that we want coaches that have a wide amount of tools that they can draw on to find that right thing of how to apply that with you in the specific point that you're in now. But as I've been talking to different coaches, I will say that some naturally, like one of the things why they're interested in this partnership is because they've done a lot of work with women entrepreneurs, or they want to focus within that sector on what they're doing.
Thanks so much for that. I think this ties in also to a question we have about the matching process. So Catherine, if I understand correctly, through the applications, we will have a sense about what the priorities are that people are working on, right? Like what it is that they're kind of what the initiative is that they're advancing, either entrepreneur or a social entrepreneur for the business that they have, and that'll give some good information about what is this person seeking to achieve. And so behind the scenes, there'll be some matching, right? Looking at like, which 3 coaches do we have who we think could be the best fit here? And then that the coachee has a chance to speak with each of those coaches. Is that right? Let me hand it over to you. I think the question is around that matching process, like how to help ensure that there's a good match on both sides.
Yeah, and I see Kristen sort of asked is, do we have set coaches or do we choose our coach? So yes, indeed, there will be a opportunity to review the few coaches that we think would be best fit for you, and then from there to go through the matching process. We don't envision necessarily that it would be a meeting with each coach. However, there is always an option as you meet with the person if they're not a right fit, or likewise if a coach thinks, you know what, I'm actually seeing that we're not a good fit, like this isn't it, that we can revisit that matching process. So we've sort of set it up that you can come back to us if the fit is not there at any point. So whether it's the start of an engagement or partway through the engagement, maybe something happens that you're like, no, this isn't what I'm looking for, this isn't working.
What are some of the criteria that you're looking for in the matching? Just to kind of build on that question. You know,
Yeah.
like if someone feels like they would be more comfortable with a female coach, like, is that possible? Maybe you could just give us an example of like two diverse profiles of the coaches who people might be linked with.
Yeah, so I think one of the things is often coaches will resonate with people at different parts in their career, right? So I actually work really well with a senior leader who is looking to step up their leadership team in what they're doing. We also have some coaches who will say, you know what, I work really well with people as they're transitioning into a new role, right? So I think UNICEF, it sounded like Megan, UNICEF has that program where as you're transitioning into something new, whether it's a lateral move or a promotion, that you want to work through those things, right? So some coaches have spent a lot of time working with various clients in that area. So to me, we'll look a little bit at that sweet spot that a coach has identified with what are the areas that you're looking to develop. And I think one of the questions is, how do you define success at the end of the 6 months, right? In that, to start putting those things together. Certainly some may be within sectors. I will be honest, and most of the coaches that we selected here, they really want to work with a leader who's making an impact and is interested in their own development. So there hasn't been a lot of, I want somebody who's working towards this cause or this specific area. They're really about the person that they're serving in that coaching relationship.
Fantastic, Catherine. One of our questions is, if somebody is independently looking for a coach, what kinds of qualities should they be looking for?
And certainly, Megan, Fiona, you guys might want to top up some things. So I would say I would start by looking for an accredited coach. So unlike if we've used doctor a couple of times, is you can see MD, somebody's gone through medical school and what they have to do. Coaches have an accrediting body as well as professional development that they need and code of conduct practices that they follow. So I think that's an important part in what you would be looking for. Then I would start to look for what am I looking to develop in, and what type of tools do they bring in that area? So for example, if I'm really looking in my emotional intelligence, my communication style, I see that we have conversational intelligence coaches that really focus in that area. So that might be some expertise that I would like to be able to draw on for that. Are a couple things that I think of in what I look for in my coach. Megan, Fiona, you've both worked with different coaches, so yeah, what are some things that you look for?
Go ahead, Megan. Jen will just, perfect. Okay.
So interesting. I actually have never been offered a choice in the coach. So, I mean, I had from the leadership program I did with INSEAD, we had a coach assigned, and obviously I think if you didn't click, that you could seek to change. And the other two coaches also were very much assigned to me. I think there was this matching process behind the scenes in terms of looking at how their areas of expertise would kind of interface with the things that I was working on. I just have found really, I've had a really valuable experience both with coaches who come from the private sector and therefore don't know a lot about our world in terms of international development or working for the UN. My first coach was one of those people. But then I've also had an experience with a coach that more specializes in purpose-driven organizations. What I found so interesting is that both of those were extremely valuable. And I think that we also, sometimes in the international development world, we're a little bit, we rarefy ourselves, and that if you haven't worked in this specific type of an organization, no one's really going to understand what you're going through. And there are elements of that that are quite specific to what we do, but what I find really interesting is that from a leadership perspective, there are so many commonalities when you look either if you're a private sector, large organization, small, startup, there's a lot of commonalities in terms of what are the kind of core components of leadership. And that relationship between you and your coach helps to bring out what's important for you. And they then are usually very experienced at how to bring in their past expertise or actually find other resources that are really going to resonate with you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'll just share one more experience. Is when I was doing a lot of fundraising a few years ago, I was feeling very depleted by that. And I felt like my expertise, growing expertise in procrastination of doing fundraising was really getting in the way of, me serving the mission, from, bringing in the money that I needed to bring in. So I just did 3 coaching sessions actually with a negotiation coach. And I was looking for specific, I knew specifically what I wanted to address. Another coach may have also, helped me with that. But at that time, I wasn't really looking to kind of like work on myself in a variety of areas, although that's not to say that's not always a good idea. But in that time, I was really just looking for help with that like inertia I had about negotiation. So the coach having negotiation coaching expertise was like very helpful. And it was like 3 sessions and I was like, okay, back on it. Catherine, does that bring up anything else for you?
Well, and it is a good point where depending on the length of that relationship, because as you say, fundraising, I also think about, there's a lot of coaches that focus in the public speaking area, right? So maybe you have a big proposal that you need to do, or you're going to be speaking in front of a large number of people that you don't usually, so you want to target in on those skills to really look for that event.
Yeah,
in
I think yeah. Again, I think right, we that's an area that's so exciting. Like if you're interested in public speaking, you can always be getting better. So that's great to know that that's available. So folks, we're so glad that you were able to join us. I'm just going to do a final call for questions to see if you have any general questions about coaching, or if you have any specific questions about the pro bono coaching opportunity. So I'll just give you a moment to enter anything you have in the chat box. And while we're waiting for that, I'm just going to do a special shout out to Gigi, Jennifer, Linda. Thanks for having your video on. I think as speakers, that's really nice for us to be able to like connect, be face to face and connect. So thank you so much for doing that. And we're really grateful that everyone took time out. Okay, we have a question here. Thanks for your question. The question is about, by the way, when is the deadline? So the deadline is April 29th. So many dates in my mind at the moment. Go ahead.
The 18th, I believe, is our date. Sunday the 18th there.
Okay, Sunday the 18th.
Of April.
Of April. Yep. Awesome. Thank you. April 19th. Thanks.
19th. Thanks, Jen.
Okay. Hey, you say Jen behind the scenes, really key to the success of this operation. So awesome. So April 19th. And
me today while he was doing his homeschooling. Mama, what day is it? So I told him, and he's like, oh, good to know. I mean, we're all a little bit losing track of time now, I think.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there an outline of what's required for the application? Thanks for your question, Jennifer. Yes, there is. So we hope, so if you go to the website, thewildnetwork.org/coaching, I think we even have a slide on that. You'll see that it's pretty comprehensive information about what the opportunity is. And then if you click either the social entrepreneur bucket or the entrepreneur, it takes you to the application. And the application, what do you think, Catherine? Takes about 10-15 minutes to complete? Maybe?
Yeah, I would think so. And a few of those questions are yourself to reflect on what are you looking to get out of this, right? So some of that reflection yourself can help us match you with the most effective coach and get that information.
Yeah, and I would sort of break the application down. You'll see when you click in. So if you go to the wildleadershipforum.org/coaching, we ask for just some information like who are you, what's your email, how can we reach you? We ask some information about like what is the work you're doing that you're advancing, and then what it is that you want to work on. And if you don't have that entirely figured out, like that's okay too. You could just sort of also offer like, here are the challenges that I'm having. Here's what I want to achieve that I'm not getting to as fast as I can. Like we understand that if you had it all figured out, you may not need the leadership coaching, but what we're trying to do is just get a sense about like what it is that you want to achieve. What is it that you want to work on? What do you feel like you could be stronger at or you would like to see differently? And then the final third of the application is just kind of letting you know about the coaching commitment. So as Catherine said, and I think one of the just extraordinary things about this opportunity is that it's a 6-month coaching engagement. So this is like the real deal. It's not like have a taste of coaching, you know, in 1 or 2 sessions. Like 6 months is really offers you the time to really you kind of advance, improve, strengthen, practice, develop new habits that are really, you know, going to be, I think, possibly quite transformational. So part of what we want to make sure is that as an applicant, you know, you feel like you're ready to do the work. So you're ready to, you know, participate in, you know, twice monthly or so calls with your coach. If you're an entrepreneur, then we just ask for you to signal that you have the support of your supervisor, because we can imagine like you might be doing those calls at work. Your supervisor won't be involved, except for we want to set you up for success, that you have your supervisor's support. So if you're kind of working on something, that you just have the support of your supervisor to be successful. So I think, yeah, maybe 20 minutes to complete the application, and hopefully it'll kind of be a joy to do it, because you'll be like, yeah, like, thank you for asking me these questions. Like, it's kind of like a good moment to reflect on, you know, where I want to go be more effective, go deeper, what I'm being challenged with. It's actually like a little bit of a taste of the coaching process. Okay, I'm going to check out our chat box one more time. Thanks everyone for your feedback. We really appreciate that. And on that note, actually any other feedback you have about what was useful of this webinar, what you'd like to see in the future. At the Wild Network, we like to practice what we preach, meaning, like Megan said, we like embrace feedback because it just helps us to be better. So all your feedback is welcome. You know, what's working and what can be better. So join me in maybe a virtual round of applause for Megan and Catherine and Monica who joined us today, and for Jen Gray behind the scenes to make sure everything went smoothly. Like, really appreciate all of you. Okay, everyone, stay safe, stay sane, as my husband likes to say, and I hope that we'll see your names pop up on the application list. And feel free to reach out if you have any specific questions. My email is Fiona, F-I-O-N-A, @thewildnetwork.org, and Jen can put that in the chat box too. All right, thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.